All right, it's season 2 time. I wrapped up the first one just now, finishing with the pilot, or not the pilot, but the first episode of season 2, where, Apophysis' ships get blown up, the invasion is stopped, the SG-1 saves the planet for the first big time, the big OS one that they gave the entire planet, that the planet never gives them credit for. Anyways, so that happens. Season 2, episode 2, kind of important. Big. Apparently, I learned something recently. Season 2, episode 2 was actually supposed to be with some random red shirt character, and then in the cutting room floor, they were like, nah, it should be Carter. And so they had to rewrite the whole episode and make it about Carter. So, anyways, they're on this planet. It's being attacked by the Goa'uld. They're trying to help refugees because apparently that's mostly what the Stargate program does, except for it makes no sense because our military does not do this. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little bit rude, but I don't know. I'll retract that statement because I don't know if that's true. Anyways, so the military, they're helping, the SG-1's helping, like, some people leave the planet, it's under attack, blah, blah, blah. They're confused. They didn't think that the Goa'uld knew about this planet, but apparently the Goa'uld found out about this planet or something. Anyways, they help them all leave. Meanwhile, while this one dude is dying, Sam is giving mouth-to-mouth. Now, she's not giving mouth-to-mouth in a very, like, sanitary manner, but, like, how can you? It's a war zone. So she's giving him mouth-to-mouth. Meanwhile, Goa'uld jumps from this dude into her mouth, and her eyes go golden. And meanwhile, there's all this, like, blood coming out of her mouth, and they're all like, what the, like, I think later, like, Daniel's like, are you okay? What the heck happened? She's like, oh, he, like, seized and bit his tongue, and while I was giving him CPR, and so they just bought it, which is, like, crazy work. Anyways, so she is now Goa'uld. She's now Goa'uld. She's a main character. What the heck? Anyways, so SG-1 comes back. They're all getting checkups. She's getting a checkup. Something weird happened at this point. I don't remember if anything weird happens at this point. Meanwhile, there's this other dude that, like, came through the gate or something that had this weird ring doodad. This weird old ring doodad that seemed sketchy, because it is. Anyways, so she comes through the gate. Also, wait, no, this guy, like, there was, like, another Goa'uld or something. Anyways, this other guy is another Goa'uld. Let's just put it that way. He's another Goa'uld. And so he comes to the gate, and apparently this guy, the other guy, he's hunting the Goa'uld that's in Carter. I forget how this is revealed. At some point, we find out that Carter has a Goa'uld in her, and the Goa'uld gives up the show and admits that they're a Goa'uld at some point when they're like, hey, you're a Goa'uld, we know you're a Goa'uld, stop fronting. And so then that Goa'uld reveals himself and is like, fine, I'm a Goa'uld, but there's other Goa'uld that's trying to kill me, and this is a bad Goa'uld, and I'm a good Goa'uld. And they're like, what do you mean you're a good Goa'uld? Goa'ulds are bad. Snakes, possession, human rights, and violations of said rights. And so the Goa'uld's like, actually, this is kind of a weird situation. I wouldn't normally take over Carter. I feel kind of bad. We don't normally, I swear I don't normally do this, okay? I swear this is just like, push, give, shove, like, sorry, kind of important. Also, I'm important, because I know things. Anyways, complicated. We don't trust this Goa'uld yet. Ever. Yet. And, the bad guy Goa'uld's, like, hunting Carter, kills some doctors in a nearby hospital, weird stuff. Not weird stuff, normal evil assassin stuff. So, he's coming after Carter, who's in, like, a max prison cell in the SGC. Gets through the SGC security just fine, by the way. Just fine. A little bit of, like, Goa'uld, bullcrap. Anyways, the assassin finds Carter, sort of kills the Goa'uld in Carter, but like doesn't finish the job, but almost does. This Gould also then dies. We find out that that Gould's called an Ashrak, which is just a Gould assassin. But they're like trained Gould assassins, and they're not Jaffa. They're Gould. So they are tougher than Jaffa, and they are smarter to a degree because they're Gould, and so they have a lot more like Gould genetic knowledge, which is a thing, by the way, but whatever. So apparently it turns out that the Gould inside of Carter is what's known as a Tok'ra, which I don't even know if they talk about it in this episode. Apparently it's a Tok'ra. Tok meaning against, and Ra meaning Ra, the Gould Ra, against Ra. They're basically just saying, screw that guy, we're Goulds, but we don't like those Goulds, and that's basically the entire plot line there. But Tok'ra are basically, they instead of just taking over humans, which they can do, and Jolinar, which is the one that took over Sam, did do that to her to a degree. But Jolinar also let Sam live and let themselves die without killing Carter, because they don't have to do that. Goulds do that on purpose out of spite. So, because they're evil. But the Tok'ra aren't, so they don't have to. Could, maybe do, sometimes out of mercy. But in this case, for Carter's sake, lets Carter live, and Jolinar gives up their life. And so Jolinar dies, and Carter lives on with this like marker of a Gould, because Jolinar died and got absorbed into her blood system. So she's like, and also there was a character back in Thor's Hammer. Remember the remove Gould thing that the Asgard created? There was a lady there that was already like, that had walked through the thing and got rid of the Gould that was in her. And so she and Carter are kind of in the same boat now, where like she could still use Gould technology because she still has Aqua in her blood. And so Carter's the same way. She still has like the Gould marker in her blood, so she can use all the tech without needing to have a Gould. And she can still like feel other Goulds. She can still like sense them, even though she doesn't have one in her actively. So yeah, Carter is now has a superpower. So that's that episode. Very important. Comes up a lot. Completely starts off the Tok'ra storyline, which is insanely important for the rest of the show. And Carter having Gould tech abilities, which is semi-important sometimes throughout the rest of the show. Next episode, prisoners. They go to space jail because they trespassed and then helped a guy escaping people, though they didn't know, but they get thrown to prison anyway because laws are strict on this planet for reasons. Anyways, while they're in prison, they meet this old lady. She seems super nice, and she seems really, 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 really smart about like bioengineering, but also chemistry. And it's in a weird way where it's like she's doing cold fusion with plants, and Carter realizes it and is like, "You're doing cold fusion with plants," and she's like, "This is just the thing I do. This is just stuff." And then she's like, "You're doing cold fusion with plants." And yeah. And so old lady and them, they're like, "Hey, we could probably escape because we know how the gate functions." And they don't have like a DHD because it's a prison. And the lady's like, "And I have cold fusion with plants?" Question mark, because she doesn't really know. She kind of does know, but she doesn't really know. She knows she's smart, but she doesn't really know how smart in comparison to like the Earthlings. So they work together to get at her, because again, she seems pretty nice. We don't know why she's there. She never makes any excuses for herself. She never ever goes like, "Oh, I didn't really do anything." She never says that. Also, all of the other prisoners are afraid of her, like severely. She is like the top dog in this prison, and yet we never question why. We just assume, they must just respect her because she's an old lady and the rest of them are guys. Yeah, that's not why they respect her. So they all escape. They bring her along, and they later find out, because she then like kind of is like working with them on some things. They kind of put two and two together, and they find out she bioengineered a plague that killed entire civilizations on 7 or 8 planets. She is a mass genocide maniac. But she didn't mean to, but she totally meant to. It's very weird. Her nickname was Destroyer of Worlds, because she destroyed worlds. Anyways, she knows this. They don't know this yet. And I think they kind of find out. So she kind of tricks them and like gives them a little bit of, I don't know, she kind of helps them a little bit with some things. And then she kind of like steals some gate addresses and dips out. And kind of like controls their computer system, because again, she's really smart. And so she's never worked with the computer before, but she still kind of used it. Anyways, she leaves. And they're all like, oh my god, we just released a mass genocidal maniac. Even though she still seems like a nice person. Sort of. So that's that episode. That doesn't come back. That doesn't matter for later at all ever, right? Joke's on us. It does. Once. It's not actually that big of a deal, to be real. Alright, and the Gamekeeper. So basically, video games, but 1988 edition. So they get to this planet and they get grabbed into these chair things that basically suction cups things to their heads, and then they all go into basically a dream world where they relive their most traumatic memories. And by their most traumatic memories, I mean Daniel and O'Neill, because Teal'c and Carter are kind of resistant to it because of the whole Gould, bloodstream Gould in the belly kind of thing. So they're kind of just tagging along with Daniel and O'Neill, and they're reliving Daniel's parents getting killed by a freak accident during an exhibit setup where a bunch of rocks toppled on them and they died in a like New York museum or something. And Daniel was like 7, and so they relived that about like 7 times. And O'Neill is reliving a mission that went really bad in like Bosnia or something in the like 70s. I don't know, special ops stuff. And multiple of his friends died. And also Kowalski's back for that episode, for that stuff. So we meet Kowalski again, which is kind of fun. A little bit of a cameo. Hey Kowalski, how's it going? You're dead. Yeah. Anyways, so they relive that a bunch of times. It turns out there's this like weird game master guy that just runs these simulations over and over again because the population of the planet kind of screwed up the planet environmentally. But now the planet's actually fine, but they've been in this like stasis mode for so long that they don't really know, and they've just been kind of like reliving their lives and their memories, and they need new entertainment. And so that's what SG-1 was for a bit. And the Gamekeeper was like, they kind of escaped. They found out that he was just like pulling a stunt to try to give more entertainment for the people there. And but it turns out that the planet's actually beautiful and like thriving, but he's worried that they're gonna like ruin it again, so he doesn't want to let them out, but the SG-1 forces him to. Anyways, they start picking flowers and he loses his mind. It's kind of funny, but also a little bit like understandable. But like he was again violating human rights. You know, we kind of talk. We deal with that a lot during this series. We deal with that a lot during this series. Anyways, so yeah. Anyways, they now have access to those funky chairs, which we will talk about in about 6 seasons. All right. The next episode, Daniel's drug abuse episode. So they go to a planet, they're mining Naquadah. There's not really much Naquadah to mine, but they're still mining it for some reason. And there's in a sarcophagus, and they get into a fight. Daniel dies. Daniel dies in this episode. All right. So Daniel dies. Also, before Daniel died, Daniel saved the life of some princess chick. And basically, she falls in love with him. Check mark for another time that Daniel has cheated on his wife. And so Daniel starts using the sarcophagus a lot because the king of this planet started using sarcophagus a lot. They aren't Goulds. There's no Goulds here. There's no Goulds. There's no Jaffa here. Why are they mining Naquadah? Anyways, so she has Daniel go use the sarcophagus a bunch of times because it is addictive. It's basically cocaine and meth and like feeling like a god times 1,000. And so they do this over and over again, and he becomes super addicted to it. They even let SG-1 go because they're by the way, half of this episode, Sam, Teal'c, and O'Neill are just in prison mines, starving to death, and Daniel's just like chilling, having a feast, and cheating on his wife and using drugs. That's the episode, guys. And so then they end up getting back. They give Daniel an intervention. Daniel tries to help them. Turns out the Goa'uld, I think, they're sending the Naquadah to the Goa'uld, but there's so little that they're sending to the Goa'uld that like the Goa'uld aren't gonna miss it, to be honest. And so they kind of like, I think they relocate the people or something, or the Goa'uld come back. I don't remember what happens, but they leave. I think they blow up the sarcophagus or something because they realize drugs are bad. Actually, a legitimately good performance by Michael Shanks as the character. To his credit, it's a good drama. Like, this show is good, okay? Like, I'm making fun of it, but it's a great show. So he does that. Next episode. Back to Thor's hammer planet. Joke's on us. The bluff wore off. And the Goa'uld showed up. Apparently, the thing doesn't work anymore. So, rip that. And the Goa'uld are taking over. Blah, 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 blah. Fighting the Goa'uld. We're going to help you. Joke's on us. We can't help you. Horus is kind of like really strong. And then Thor's chariot shows up because they go and call Thor to be like, hey, Thor, we need your help. And Thor's in Asgard, but we don't know if he exists. We think he might just be a myth. But there's like tech, there's like stuff, there's like things that we're doing. We're going through this like trial chamber thing that like basically just as long as you know basic like algebra and geometry or something, you're golden. And then the Asgard will show up and be like, yeah, we'll help you, we'll talk with you. So Thor showed up in his ship, got rid of all the Goa'ulds, but Horus did escape, but he's mad. But to be fair, he broke a treaty, but we don't know about the treaty, but he broke a treaty. And for once, the Asgard could actually hold up the treaty at this time. They can't forever. Bluffs. So Thor shows up, and I was floored because Thor was like, oh, you guys aren't really smart enough to pass this trial. Even you guys, the Earth humans, aren't really smart enough to have really passed this trial to deserve to talk to us. And then I'm like, Thor, your trial was literally like it took Sam and Daniel to both work together to use like ancient history knowledge and just like math to solve this trial. And it's like, Thor, your trial was solvable by Isaac Newton. Like Earth could have solved your trial hundreds of years ago. What are you talking about? That they weren't really evolved enough to get under. Like, I was just like, Thor, you make your trial more complicated, buddy, because he sure didn't. Like, if he wants the humans to be more evolved to be able to complete his trial, then like, holy crap, man, make it more complicated, because I could have figured that out in high school when I had a little bit more active memory of what algebra and geometry did. Anyways, so that's Thor's chariot. His chariot is a ship, by the way, which is just a big ship. It looks kind of like a hammer. Everything's kind of hammer-esque, because we're really on this whole Thor Asgardian thing. Oh, and the Asgards are actually like the Greys. They're the gray alien kind of like archetype. That's what the Asgard are. They're cool. They're the homies. Remember, part of the 4 races: Asgard and the Nox, and the Furlings that we don't know yet, and the Ancients that we are going to talk a lot more about later. Next episode's Meshed in a Bottle. That one does not matter. I think it has literally nothing to do with anything. There's this like new dude who like helps in the gate room, tech stuff, like a computer officer kind of thing, and he's got a thing for Sam. That's like the biggest plot point that happened in that episode. O'Neill gets stabbed in the shoulder by a thing. My wife hates that episode because it just irks her. I get it. It's rough. It seems horrible. Oh, and now we find out that Apophis isn't dead, and we think that Apophis has kidnapped and brainwashed Ryak, which is true. He has done both of those things. Also, Teal'c's wife is now no longer Hispanic and is now black, although she might have been mixed in the first place, but she looked a lot more Hispanic, in my opinion, to be honest. It's just like, they don't talk about it. She's a different actress. And it's just very weird. It's jarring when you watch it quickly, because you're just like, oh, that's not the same actress, and she plays the character very differently too. It's weird. Anyways, they still have a thing, although she is now remarried, because reasons. But also the guy she remarried betrays them, and they have to kill him. So now she's alone again, but she is still in love with Teal'c, and Teal'c is still in love with her. And the only reason she remarried was because they were literally forced to live in the slums prior to that, because again, Teal'c is a traitor and she's Teal'c's family. Ryak was kidnapped, brainwashed. They unbrainwashed him via electric shock therapy. And then they go back to some other planet. They don't go back to Chulak, I don't think. They go somewhere else. Anyways. After that, they get a message from Abydos. Hey, we haven't heard about Egypt, the planet, in a while. And Daniel's father-in-law, so Sharae's dad and Skara's dad, he contacts them and is like, hey, Sharae's here. Why don't you come say hi to your wife? You promised you would bring her back. She's already home. Come say hi to her. But it turns out that she's only there because she's in charge of the body right now, because she's pregnant, which is kind of a, like, taboo amongst Goulds, by the way, because they made the host pregnant. The Goulds don't typically do that, because it's kind of like, it's a weird, like, blending of the genetic memory code of the Gould and a human, and it makes the human baby, who is a human, have the memory and, like, brain of a Gould / human, but, like, Gould, which is crazy, apparently, and makes them, like, have way more active memory of, like, all the Gould genetic memory. They don't really explain why it just, like, makes us superhuman, basically, but they don't really explain it. It doesn't really make much more sense than, like, just a Gould being a Gould. But anyways, Apophis is doing this because he wants to take it as a host, because he's had his host for a long time. So she's pregnant, and so because she's so pregnant, the Gould has to stay out of the control in order to keep the pregnancy, otherwise she would miscarry. And so the human is in charge of the pregnancy, so she's back on Abydos chilling. So Daniel goes and says hi and is all sad, and is like they're trying to figure things out, but also she's pregnant, so they're like, what the heck is going on? Holy crap, this is kind of screwy. Daniel's like, you're my wife, but you're pregnant by Apophis. I really hate that guy. It's a lot of mixed emotions. Anyways, but then she has the child, and she was, does she have the child? She gives birth in this episode, right? Yeah. Anyways, the baby is taken by her dad or something. The baby, what happens to the baby? I don't remember. Anyways, something happens. Either the baby goes back with Apophis, or the baby goes with her dad. The baby kind of, like, gets whisked away. Or something. Later we find out the baby is taken by Sharae's, like, midwife or something to a place called Kep. And Kep is a, like, Buddhist, that's the word, is like a Buddhist, like, temple planet, basically, like, where the Jaffa think that, like, to the Jaffa's version of, like, Nirvana, Mecca. More like a Mecca. More like a Mecca. That's a pretty good, like, you know, it's where they would go to find enlightenment. Literally, that's how they phrase it. We find that out later. That's where the baby's taken to, and is watched over there. That's where it eventually ends up. How it gets there exactly, I don't quite remember. Something happens. I don't remember. Doesn't matter. Not really. Horus shows up. Horus keeps showing up in this season. Horus and Apophis are kind of like, they're like brothers or something. They hate each other. I don't even think it's Horus. I think it's a different one, but I think it's Horus. They hate each other. They fight a lot. Horus keeps showing up, but he keeps getting a short on his stick. This is the one where Horus is going to force thing, and Jack throws a knife through his thing, even though he has a shield. It's a whole plot device. Anyways, I think... Wait, does Horus die in this episode? Horus might die in this episode. No, Horus does not die in this episode. Horus dies later. Horus dies later. Anyways, then there's the episode where Teal'c becomes a giant bee bug cocoon. It's gross, but there is a kind of a cute, like, kid storyline in Teal'c being like a cool dude in Earth public. But if you don't like bugs, do not watch the episode Bane. It's gross. It's a rough one. Also, does not matter much for the rest of the storyline. So, if you're okay with bugs, sure. If you're not, it's skippable. It's skippable. All right, and then now it's the Tok'ra episodes. So there's a couple episodes with Tok'ra. Basically, the biggest thing about the Tok'ra is, again, this is where we learn a lot more about how they're not really Goulds, and they hate being called Goulds, so don't call them Goulds. They're Tok'ra. And they talk about that a lot. And so basically, we learn a lot more about Jalinar, and we meet this dude named Martouf, which is the Tok'ra boyfriend of Jalimar / girlfriend of Jalinar. The Goulds are kind of like wishy-washy on gender, to be honest, but the humans aren't. But with the Tok'ra, they're vibing. They typically tend to have like favorite types of hosts of like between men or women, but they're not picky. If push comes to shove, they'll do what they gotta do. But the Tok'ra, they're a little bit more like open to it because they talk about it. They take volunteering hosts, typically hosts that are like dying or just kind of down with it. Pretty rare to be down with it, to be fair. But a lot of times if they're like dying or they're sick or something is happening, because the ghoul can like heal them and keep them alive. So yeah, that happens. But the Tok'ra won't. The Tok'ra would rather die than take an unwilling host. The case with Jalinar was a bit strange, and was partly because Jalinar was very desperate to get information to the Tok'ra, and was honestly desperate to find Martouf again. I think honestly Jalinar was just worried to die without meeting Martouf again, and I think that's the main motivator that they kind of find out in these episodes. Simultaneously, because the Tok'ra and Sam, they're tight. Basically, we find out that there's this older Tok'ra named Selmak that is dying, and Selmak needs a host because Selmak's host is dying. But Selmak isn't really dying, but Selmak's old, and the host is old and dying. And there's nothing more Selmak can really do. The host is just really, really old. And they don't use sarcophagus. They don't use the sarcophagus technology because they know it's so addictive and dangerous. And also can cause, like, the sarcophagus over time also causes basically Alzheimer's and dementia over time, especially over massive use over time, which is partly also why they don't use it. So it's not just an addictive thing, it's also because it causes like mental decline eventually. But that's like extended a lot of use. But we meet some characters that are like that. The king of that planet where Daniel was doing drugs, sarcophagus drugs, the king was like that already, but there's another Gould later on we meet that's like that too. We haven't met him yet, but we will. The Tok'ra. Yeah, so it turns out, simultaneously, we find out Sam's dad is like an ex-general in the Air Force, and he's kind of like a fun guy. Their relationship's on the rocks. because she can't really talk about what she's doing, and he feels like she's not doing what she wanted to do, but she's actually doing way more than she ever wanted to do, but she can't tell him that. But he thinks that she's not really doing what she wants to do, and he feels bad, and so he tries to pull some strings, and she's like, Dad, don't pull any strings. I'm actually doing what I genuinely really want to do. And he's like, no, this sounds boring. What are you doing? And she's like, this is just a front for what I'm really doing. I can't tell you about what I'm really doing. And he doesn't really know that, but he can't know. Anyways, so turns out he's dying. He's got cancer. And she's like, oh no, he's got cancer. But hey, guess what? Selmac, he's a host, right? So let's make a deal. So so they bring Jacob Carter, her dad, over to Selmac, and they kind of hit it off, a little bit of boomer humor, and they and so then he becomes a host for Selmac, and Selmac is curing his cancer and keeping him alive. The Gould find out about the planet, blah blah blah. They believe something about crystals and Tok'ra and tunnels, because their bases are always tunnels. Then they use these crystals to make the tunnels, and it's kind of this weird like growing tunnel thing. It's pretty cool, pretty neat, pretty interesting. I think this is also where we find out there's like a school spy amongst the Tok'ra, and the Tok'ra don't trust the humans, but then because the humans are the ones who figure this out, the Tok'ra start to trust them a little bit, and then Jacob Carter and Selmac being a host and hosty relationship, they merge that relationship a little bit better, so the Tok'ra actually trust the Earthlings, because they don't really trust the Earthlings, because the Tok'ra are like, look, we're spies, we're a spy network, and you guys are not spies, and you guys are not you're not good at being secretive, and you guys just blow things up. And then the Earthlings are like, yeah, but we've like killed Goulds, we killed Ra, and the Tok'ra are like, thanks, but like so many headaches because you did that. We had to do so much damage control because of you doing that. And they're like, we don't know, man. Like, we're just trying to feel it out here. And the Tok'ra were like, that's why we don't want to deal with you. And I get it, but they're like, again, being kind of gatekeepy. Just like the Tolan, just like the Nox, a little gatekeepy, like, oh, you little children, you're too dumb. And the Earthlings are like, look, we're already out here. What the heck do you want from us? Which is a speech that, like a legitimate, like, I think that we're already out here is a speech that I think O'Neill gives to the Asgard, I think this season. So it is a plot point. All right, spirits. Surprisingly important episode. People wouldn't think about it. People don't think about this episode being important, but this episode's actually really, really important. There's so many alien species that they bring up in this beginning couple of seasons that are like really powerful, but like one-off species that they don't ever come back to later on, that are like, these species are like arguably better, like stronger than the Goulds. They're just way less like all over the place. There's just way fewer of them individually, and it's like, you know, if we just like literally band it all together, we could have like an Avengers moment and just wipe out the Gould, but they never do that. I think it's a missed opportunity. To their credit, you only have so much money, so many costumes. I feel it. So anyways, the spirits episode, they go to this planet. It looks like it's a pretty chill planet, and there's these cool metal called trinium, got there, called trinium, that basically is fragile, but it's kind of like aluminum, or it's kind of like tin. I always think of it like tin, where it's like, it's not very strong on its own, but like as a alloy, it's really, 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 really useful. And so they want to use trinium for a lot of things, but it's kind of hard to get, and they have to mine it. And this planet is basically inhabited by, or at least where they're at in the planet, is inhabited by essentially what seems to be ancient American, Native American culture people, and they are very like, hey, we got a specific way that we get the trinium. It comes, you know, they call it something else. It's not called trinium to them. They call it something else, and I don't remember what. the key. They call it the key. Well, they get the key out of the river. It comes from the mountains, and some of it like gets into the river, and it comes into them, and then they can use it to build their stuff. So they build a lot of stuff out of this tritium, like their arrowheads, and like a lot of their houses and stuff like are like made out of tritium, kind of weaved together in certain ways, because again, it's like a Native American kind of culture. Mind you, they call them Indians. This is 1998. Give them some slack. They don't know. The political correctness goes up as the series progresses, sort of, sometimes, maybe. So the American Indian people, they're chill, kind of stereotypical to be honest. So kind of iffy on that one, but they're chill, they're fun, they're cool. The main guy's kind of fun. I forget his name, but he's a cool dude. We like him. He's a homie. Also, SG-1 thinks they're schizophrenic, because they're talking about like these like spirits, hence the name, that watch over them and that protect them and do all these things, and they're like different animals, and so they're learning about them. Turns out the spirits, they're real, but they're not animals. They are, you guessed it, an alien race that is far more powerful than we give them credit for. So basically, we all go back to Earth to teach the Native Americans about our mining techniques and how we are going to try to, mine efficiently, but then also like replace nature. And the Native Americans are like, hey man, this is still really destructive, and I don't really like this, and like I know you're trying, but sorry, you're just gonna have to get key like the rest of us. Why can't you just be happy with that? And they're like, we need way more than you could ever imagine. And anyways, so it turns out also the aliens are with them, and they like copied some of the people to look like them and infiltrate the SGC to basically like see if they're gonna lie and see if they're gonna try to trick them, which we were gonna lie, we were gonna trick them, and we were gonna do some classic America colonialization, imperialization through classic good old capitalist American dream kind of methods, because we are not an empire. So the aliens do not take kindly to this. They kind of freak out, and then eventually I think O'Neill or Jackson kind of talk them down and kind of get them to realize that like, hey, we're so sorry, blah blah blah, something whatever. Somehow we make up, somehow some way we make do, and we get some trinium from them somehow, but less than we would like. But we do get some trinium from them, which we use for things over the course of the rest of the show. We don't meet these characters again. We don't meet these aliens again, even though we have a relationship with them, but we don't meet them ever again. I think we also get trinium from another planet at some point, to be fair, but still. It's weird. It's weird. Next episode, the Touchstone. So this is basically, there's this device that controls the weather on this planet, and it's kind of cool, and the SG team are going to study it, but they go back to the planet, and the planet's all in like turmoil. There's like a hurricane or some crazy stuff, and they're like, what's going on? You guys stole our stuff. And the SGC's like, what? We didn't steal anything. We just came back. What are you talking about? And they're like, you people showed up to the gate, stole our thing, and left in the middle of the night. And they're like, huh? How did that happen? Because we sure didn't do it. And the SGC's like, we sure didn't do it. And the NID's sure like, we might have did it. And then so basically there's a bit of a black ops situation going on. And remember that second gate that we had? It's not with the Russians yet. I said it was going to be with the Russians eventually, but it's not yet. And it's currently locked up somewhere, and apparently it's been used to go steal things from other cultures, including the Madronan Touchstone, which controls their weather. And throughout the episode, there's comments about how like there's like crazy weather things happening on Earth because they're screwing with the thing on Earth, and it's like causing all these weather disturbances. So just fun fact. That's the episode. They don't catch the people. They get through the gate, but they do find out that it's happening, and they add more restrictions to stop this from ever happening again. Right? Anyways, next episode, probably one of the best episodes of the entire show, to be honest. They go to this weird planet, which isn't a planet, it's more of a room, and it's a weird room that looks vaguely Gouldish, because I gotta say, they did not nail down what they wanted the ancients to be like yet. And so the walls are all kind of Naquity, Gouldy. It's a little bit weird. And there's this ring of like ancient text, ancient as in like the species, Alterans for those trained of you that know what those are. That the text is in a circle, and if you walk through it, and by if you, I mean Jack walks through it, it like turns on the lights, and then this like weird, like very bioengineering kind of looking device, like growth thing kind of shows up on the wall. It's very gross looking, to be real. And again, they use this tech again later on in the show with the ancients, but it is like really not their style. It's so strange. But it's just a matter of like they didn't really nail down what they wanted the ancient tech to look like. So that pops out of the wall, and then Teal'c goes up to it and he looks into it and he was like, I don't know, it looks like some fancy spinning lights and stuff. It's kind of weird. And then O'Neill's like, I want to look. And he puts his head in there and he looks at it and he's like, wow, that's weird. And then it like grabs his head and like sucks him on and like keeps him on. And he's like staring at it. And he's like and he's like in this thing. And then it like finishes whatever it's doing and it like lets him go and he drops to the ground and it like retracts back into the wall. And they're all like freaking out. And that's roll credits, opening credits. And then they pull him back to Earth. And he seems fine. He's like, I seem fine. The doctor's like, you seem fine. Everybody's like, he seems fine. And then in their debrief, while everybody's going like, oh yeah, he seems fine, he's like, yeah, I seem Cronus. And they're like, huh? The hell does that mean? And he's like, I see Norcrum. I'm crotching. And they're like, are you having a stroke? And he's like, I'm fine. And they're like, no, you're not. And so then they check him again and he seems fine, but his brain, something's going on with his brain. So he starts just randomly dropping basically what seems like ancient Latin. And Daniel doesn't quite pick up on it, but he has an earworm. He's like, something about that sounds familiar, and he starts figuring it out. He kind of figures out that it's Latin, so he starts to sort of translate what O'Neill is saying, and it's also like vibes based because like you can kind of what O'Neill is really saying when he's like, oh yeah, my okram seems okay. He's like, my head seems fine. It's like it kind of makes sense. But eventually he stops just speaking English outright. He just can't speak English. He only speaks in this like ancient Latin that like it's like really, really ancient. Like it's like isn't even Latin, but is like basically Latin. It seems to be what Latin was a derivative of, right? That's what it seems like, predating Latin. So Daniel's translating. O'Neill can still like write in English, but he cannot speak in English. And he kind of eventually just kind of goes mute altogether, and he doesn't stop talking because his brain basically just starts like too much is happening, and it's too much for his brain to handle. And so they're all worried, like, oh, he's gonna like die. His brain's gonna like fizzle out, which it would if it kept going. Because basically, what it turns out is that this thing that he got his head stuck onto was what's called an ancient repository of knowledge. And it basically is just this giant database of ancient knowledge. And it got downloaded entirely into his head, which is way too much information for any human brain to handle. And in the show, they kind of joke about it as being like, especially not O'Neill, but like, he's smart, he's not dumb, but nevertheless, too much info for his brain, just biologically. So he's kind of like gonna die if nothing happens. But they're like, well, what if we can contact the Asgard? They might be able to help us. They're super smart and cool and awesome. But anyway, so they're trying to contact the Asgard, but like it's just not really working. They're not hearing back fast. And O'Neill, meanwhile, is like tinkering. He's tinkering with stuff, and he makes this weird device. He takes like the energy out of Teal'c's staff weapon and a bunch of random pieces around, and he makes this big like lamp. Is what it seemed like, and he's all excited. And then he at some point He also like messes with the computer system that has all of the gate addresses that we took from ancient Egypt database. Because by the way, there was like this database. It was basically a bunch of addresses marked on a wall that they downloaded into the computer manually, which is crazy. Anyways, that's what they've been going off of on their trips. They've been using those addresses. O'Neill writes a code into the computer to add in automatically like a lot more addresses because the Goa'uld didn't make the gates. The people who made this thing that downloaded the information into Jack's head, they made the gates. They know how it works. They know more gate addresses and know how to access them than the Goa'ulds do, which is mind-blowing for season 2. And so he adds this algorithm in that basically updates the computer system and adds like double the amount of gates that they did not have before. And so they call that the ancient repository gates, and they kind of subset them, mark them separately, because essentially, not that they're unknown to the Goa'uld, but they're more likely to be unknown to the Goa'uld, and more known to the ancients, the people who made the gates. So, important because it kind of comes up later, but it's like a whole plot device is how the story continues for a long time, and they do bring up those gate addresses in particular a few times in the future. So he does this, he updates that. Meanwhile, he made this weird lamp thing. It turns out it's a giant battery, and like a super charged battery, and he hooks that up into the power mainframe, and then he turns it on because he's gonna die if he doesn't, like, something doesn't happen here. He's gonna like have a stroke or something. And so, but they don't know what to do. They can't get a hold of Asgard. But O'Neill has the ancient memories. He has the ancient knowledge. He's kind of a genius right now. He's doing math that Sam is like, I don't even understand this math. She can like identify it, but she's like, this is crazy stuff. This is insane. Like truly insane. And it's like crazy. Anyways. So O'Neill does this. He kind of hacks into the computer a little bit. He dials the gate. He dials 8 numbers. I've said 7. There's only been 7 numbers. 7. He dials 8. What does that mean? Really far away Stargates. As in a whole other galaxy kind of Stargate. Okay? So I mean like really far away. That's why they need an 8th gate to kind of designate, like, it's like when you try to dial into a different country, you need the 1 at the start, you know? International call. That's what we're talking about here, okay? Again, the phone analogy, it just works. So, he goes to another galaxy, and it's the Asgard galaxy, because the Asgard, by the way, aren't from this galaxy. They're not from the Milky Way. They're from somewhere else. Andromeda? Somewhere else. They call it the Asgard galaxy. He goes there. He goes actually to the Asgard home planet, I'm pretty sure, oddly enough, which is, I think, is it Othala? That's the only Asgard planet that comes to mind, so maybe it's that one. He goes there. There's a whole bunch of Asgard. They kind of show up. They're like, huh? Who are you? What are you doing here? And they kind of realize, they're like, oh, you're O'Neill. You're one of those Earth people. Because we're smart and we talk to each other. We communicate. Communication. It's important. So, O'Neill talks to them. And he's like, I'm gonna, like, die. And they're like, yeah, you got too much crap in that brain, young child. Because, again, even the Asgard are a little belittling. Okay? But hold on that horse. We're not going to get angry at them yet about calling us children. They take the ancient knowledge out, right? Because they're like, because they can do that because they're cool like that and they have powers and they're smart. So they remove the ancient knowledge from O'Neill. Easy peasy, because they're super geniuses and smart. And O'Neill's like, he looks like he hasn't slept in 4 days. Which, to be fair, I think canonically in the movie, or in the episode, he truly hasn't slept in like 2 or 3 days. So he looks like death. But he's like, holy crap, thank you. And then he gives like some speech about like helping them, and about like how like, hey, we're out here and like we're doing this, and we know that we're gonna make mistakes, and that we have no idea what we're doing, but like we're doing it. Either help us, or like, I don't know, screw you kind of thing. He doesn't quite have to get to that point. He's a little bit more optimistic and trying to be slightly diplomatic. Not that Jack is known for that. And they talk to him, and they're like, hey, look, we're insanely impressed that you didn't immediately die upon receiving all of this information in your brain. They're like, we cannot believe that you got here. They're like, this alone is insane to us, and we did not realize that you as a species had evolved to this point. And O'Neill's like, cool. And they're like, sure, don't get too excited, you're still a baby, but like maybe you're a toddler. And then O'Neill's like, hey, I'll take it. And so they're like, hey, there were the 4 races. And he's like, yeah, we learned about them. You, the Nox. And he's like, the Nox. And then he's like, yeah, hey, I met them. I know the Nox. And they're like, the Ancients. They're like, yeah. And he's like, the Furlings. He's like, yeah, we don't know them. And then he's like, but then they're like, and now there might be a 5th race, and implying humanity might be able to kind of join that echelon of kind of big dogs in the galaxies. Pretty neat, pretty cool stuff. Great episode, love it, really good. Next episode is the black hole. There's a black hole on another planet, and they can't save the team that's on the planet because black holes. And the gate can't shut down because the black hole is powering the gate, and it's sucking the wormhole in because black holes are crazy. And it's actually causing a time dilation issue on Earth because of the gate. And so if you're in the SGC versus at the surface level of the SGC, is like time is moving to where it's like every couple minutes down here is like a couple days up here by the end of the episode. So like in terms of normal time, I think the episode transpires over like a month. And SGC time, it's like a few hours at best. It's crazy. But yeah, gate wormhole stuff. They drop a bomb in the gate wormhole to like separate the wormhole, to like cut off the wormhole so that the black hole stops sucking on the Earth and doesn't just swallow the whole Earth up, because it would have. And O'Neill has this competition sort of with this like ex-colonel that used to be a teammate of O'Neill's, but he like betrayed them, but he didn't really betray them, but that's what O'Neill felt like. That guy dies, he falls into the wormhole trying to help save it, but O'Neill doesn't because he's the main character. That's the episode. Black holes are important. We talk about them a lot, sort of, sometimes. Holiday, there's this character Michello. He makes all this old tech that to fight the Gould. He was like an he's like an OG like rebel against the Gould, that the Gould kind of hate, and they hate him. They could never catch him. He was always slippery like that. And then basically he swaps bodies with Daniel to kind of live out a day of being alive, and he was going to take over Daniel's body, but then eventually they got him to swap back, and he dies. Both characters are played by Michael Shanks, because it's kind of funny, because they were going to have some other person do Michello, but then they were like, what if we just make Michael Shanks like really old looking, and he just does like a silly voice the whole time, and so that's what he does. So Daniel is, yeah. It was basically just an opportunity for Michael Shanks to just kind of like have fun as an actor, because he, I think throughout the show, behind the scenes, kind of basically just like wanted to be able to like show off his acting ability, but was also in like an episodic adventure show where like that's not really like the goal. And so that's why Daniel gets a lot more like drama kind of stuff, storylines. That's why Michael Shanks gets a lot of like double roles, like he gets to play multiple characters. He plays Thor, I believe, as well as Daniel Jackson. Like he plays a lot of different characters because he kind of wants to just show that he can do more than just be a guy. Which is partly why he takes a break for a season. Anyways, there's an episode where Apophis dies, sort of. They find Apophis. He like crash lands on a planet. They capture him. They interview him. He's like dying. He's like begging for asylum because he was like being killed by Horus, because Horus was actually beating him. Or was it? No, it wasn't Horus. It wasn't Horus. It wasn't Horus. It was Sokar. I think it was Sokar. I think Sokar was beating him. And so Sokar was beating him. And basically, he was dying. And he did die. But they sent his body to Sokar because Sokar was like... He was like bombarding the Iris with like a radiation or something like that. And he was basically threatening to come kill Earth unless they sent him Apophis. And they were like, screw it, we'll send him his dead body. And the Tok'ra were involved, and they were like, don't do that. And they're like, why? And they're like, he's just gonna resurrect him and torture him forever. Do you really, like, does the host deserve that? And they're like, Apophis deserves that, and also we can't have Sokar doing this to us all the time. And anyway, so they give him back the body. It's a bit of a moral dilemma, a bit of like Apophis is dead, finally, right? Finally? Right? Anyways, and then there's the plant people episode. It's kind of pointless, boring. Basically just like, be a little bit more careful when you visit planets, guys. Come on. And then there's Charlie, which is the name of O'Neill's son, and this character calls himself that for that reason. And we hear about the Retalia, or the Ritu? They say the Ritu. Or Retalia is the name of the planet, but the Ritu are the people. They're an extra-dimensional species. So, we've had alternate realities when Daniel went to the alternate reality and found out about the Apophis invasion. This is an alternate dimension. So we have, in Stargate, we have timelines, which we'll get to in one more episode. We have, sort of, they do a little bit less of timelines, to be fair. But they have alternate realities, and they have alternate dimensions. So realities are going to be where it's literally the multiple reality like theory of like every decision causes a branch, and any major decision causes a branch of like, what if you decide to be a captain, or whether you decide to be a scientist for Carter, for instance. That will change how history goes. And like it's tied to time travel to a degree, because time travel can cause those branches as well. But at the end of the day, alternate realities is a separate thing from time travel in the show, but related. Anyways, alternate realities. We've seen that with the mirror. This episode talks about an alternate dimension species. So there are alternate dimensional planes of existence. They seem a little bit more finite, but not quite finite. But it's more about like they're closer in the like spectrum of where we're at, and so the ones that are closer, you can more easily like kind of jump to. But I think it's still technically infinite, but it is more finite in terms of ones that you can actually feel like realistically connect to or be related to. So the Ritu live on an alternate dimensional plane, but that dimension is very close to our dimension. And so they can interact physically with a lot of things in our dimension. They can interact physically, but we cannot see them and we cannot touch them. We can't, but they can interact with us. They're basically just invisible aliens, and they're very creepy and they're very dangerous. Apparently, the Goa'uld and the Ritu hate each other. And the Goa'uld really, really hate the Ritu, and because they're actually a really huge threat in this way, and so the Goa'uld have tried to essentially annihilate the Ritu. And the Ritu are in a bit of like a civil war, and so there's these like Ritu rebels is what we hear about, and they are trying to basically actively fight the Gould through like guerrilla tactics, and they do not. And basically, their theory, I guess, what they decide, the guerrilla tactic that they decide to take, is they recognized that the Goulds use humans as hosts. So, what if we just kill all the humans? Which wouldn't even work, because the Goulds don't need humans. Goulds can take over pretty much anything. They just like humans because we look good. Genuinely, they like humans because we look good. That's why they stopped using Unas. It's not because Unas don't exist anymore, or there was some sort of problem with them. They are legitimately physically more and like powerful and strong. The reason they don't like the Unas compared to humans typically is because humans are prettier, and I think because they genuinely have like they like having sex as humans. I think that's legitimately a thing that they kind of like hint and they kind of talk about, but like they don't bring up very much. But that's basically it. And so the Ritu's theory, the rebel Ritu, are like, well, let's just kill all the humans. But the main group of Ritu are like, no, that's a bad idea. The humans haven't done anything wrong. And also, there's just so many humans around the galaxy. It's like, we can't realistically kill all the humans. Like, we might as well still try to target the Gould themselves. It doesn't really work. Anyways, the Ritu kind of never come up again. We sort of talk about them at some point later, I think, maybe. But what is important is the gun that we learn about from this episode. There's a character that's this like human engineered character that calls himself Charlie, that was a bioengineered human from the Ritu that was engineered, and he has like extra brain pieces to basically be able to see the Ritu as a human. And so they kind of like bioengineer him to be a bridge between the two, to communicate with the humans to try to stop the rebel Ritu, which I think they do succeed in somehow or something. But the kid is also going to die because of it, because his organs are all screwy and he's kind of doomed to die. But the Ritu, so there's these guns that the Tok'ra have, that are also what the Goa'uld have, that basically just show the alternate dimension. It basically reveals them in like, it shows like it sends out like a wavelength thing that basically reveals them to our plain sight, as if they're in the aim of the gun, and then you can shoot them. So that's basically a thing, and the gun's pretty effective at killing them. But that gun is important for other reasons, similar reasons, but other reasons later. So, the Ritu, that gun, 1969, time travel time, baby. It's a sci-fi show, gotta have a time travel episode. We have at least one here. We have multiple. Anyways, this one, we go back in time to 1961, and it is purely by accident. They happen to dial a gate that is passing past or through a sun that is actively, having a solar flare. And so because of the solar flare, it screws with the gate somehow and basically sends them back in time. They explain it. I don't think it makes any sense. If I remember correctly, it's just some science babble to convince you that it makes sense. It sends them back in time. So they go back in time to 1961. And so, in 1969, sorry. And so in 1969, the gate is, of course, not where it was, and it was a nuclear silo at the time. So they're in the bottom of like a rocket testing facility. And so they're in a burn chamber where they were about to test a burn, and then they found out there were people in there. So then they get captured. They think they're Russian spies. They meet the young, at the time, like Major Hammond, so General Hammond, as a 28-year-old or something, because he was just a cadet or whatever. He was like a major. Anyways, so they're like taken prisoner. They're gonna take them somewhere. They like get them to. They basically break out. They make a deal with Hammond and give him like a note that he gets, that he then keeps later as an adult, which matters for reasons because Hammond was able to, because they're able to basically figure out how this happened. They figure out the solar flare thing, and they figure out that when the solar flares happen, and then they also figure out how to like get the solar flare to come back to their time in the future. As well, they figure out how to like plan when the solar flare that they hit in the future happened, because it was the Earth's sun. It was the Earth's sun. That's why we know about it. They were able to plan that so that General Hammond could cause this to happen again as a general, so that this all matches up, and so the timeline doesn't get too screwed up, which works. But they try to go through the gate. In 1969, they do a bunch of like road trip, kind of life as a highway kind of stuff. It's a good time. We all enjoy it. It's fun. Teal'c wears fun bandanas and stuff that hide his Teal'c mark, which is fun. His Jaffa mark. Excuse my coughing. Anyways, so then but they try to go through a wormhole, but they kind of screwed up. They went through a little bit late or something. Oh no. And they end up really far in the future. And it's like way further. And the old lady Cassandra walks in, and the gate room's all shut up. Like closed for business, which is weird in retrospect, because I'm like, knowing how the rest of the show goes, this is a weird world to end up in, that they still get here, that the gates just like shut down. Does that imply that like they just end up having more ships or something? I don't know. It's weird. And then she just like has tech like on a wristband or something, like the Asgard, which also like kind of makes sense in retrospect now that I think about it. And basically she's able to send them back in time with like a different solar flare or something, and they go back in time to their normal time. God. Okay. And then the season finale, which is O'Neill wakes up in a weird alternate reality time kind of thing, like as if he just woke up out of being frozen for a long time, and it's like 30 years in, or it says here 8 decades, 80 years in the future, and all of his original team are dead. They found him on some mission or some planet or something, and it's crazy. And they go, it's a bit of a recap episode, to be honest, and at the end of it, they basically kind of find out that actually, joke's on them, they were all captured by Hathor. Hathor's back, because she didn't die. So they took over, they were taken by Hathor, kidnapped, and basically mind, like not controlled, but like tricked. They were just tricked into, she basically like 1-to-1 remade the SGC, but also like not quite. So like there's like lights in the gate room that in the normal SGC are like rectangles, but in hers are circles. And it's something that I noticed as a kid. I'm like, those lights aren't right. And it's like, well, yeah, because it's not perfect. It's purposefully not right. But I thought it was being smart when I was 8, you know? And so anyways, it turns out she's in charge. She take over. She kind of was trying to trick them, blah, blah, blah. She tried to make O'Neill a Gould this time, because she's got something for O'Neill. She thinks he's a cool guy. She thinks he's a good #1. Anyways, something about Tok'ra here. It's like Tok'ra used to be on this planet or something, blah, blah, blah. They killed her. There's this other Gould that's like her #2. He's kind of in charge. He's got this special like vest plate thing that's like armor that makes him special. And then there's like, they're like guarding the gate. They do a bunch of like swippy swappy who's on which side and control the gate and blah blah blah. Teal'c and Hammond go find Braytek, and they find this ship. It's an old Jaffa ship that is designed to fit through a gate and fly through a gate. Why they stopped making these, who knows, because they seem really useful. Is kind of the inspiration for the jumper technology, in my opinion, later that they use with the Ancients and Atlantis series. I'm dying. So they use this Jaffa ship to go through the gate and surprise all the bad guys on the other side, save the whole SGC team, and they get through, and happy ending, and Hathor's dead. And that's the end of season 2 and the beginning of season 3. All right.